Welcome into Winging It Wednesday. It's 7:09 here at Acadiana's Morning News. Bernie, what is your problem with Randy Travis? Every time this song comes
Randy
up,
Travis.
you look at me like, why would you play this? We're not doing a murder story.
No, I know that. But
digging up bones is fun.
I don't know, bro.
He's the one that had the naked DUI, right?
Oh, come on, please.
Our panelists are here, by the way. Stafford Barnett, Carol Ross, Warren
That's
Cottle.
a bad visual, bro. Seriously.
Yeah,
But he legally. So I feel for the guy. He's got some medical issues, but he legally fought the release of this thing and lost. And so now there's video of him on the internet.
Because didn't he pee on the cop car?
Oh, my
it was bad.
I think he did.
It was bad.
I'm sorry, but that's funny.
It's part of it.
Stop.
Anyway, all right. Hey,
That's a must-see TV. Oh, wait, this radio. All right.
The folks in Washington are getting back to work, or so they say. We talked to Rachel Sutherland yesterday, who talked about Congress's plans, and legislative agenda also extends to the White House, as well as President Trump has a lot on his plate. We've heard about infrastructure. We talked about last week entitlements, DACA also coming up. Warren, we'll start with you this week. Is there any bipartisan support for any of this that will kind of set 2018 on the right foot?
That's a word that we just throw around all the time, and I think we need to take that out of our vocabulary, because who cares about bipartisanship as long as they get something done? And that, the more that one side wants to sit there and fight the other one, to hell and back over nothing, in the end, it doesn't suit their purpose very well. And you look at what happened with the Republicans on the times they have done that over the last 8 years, and they paid dearly for it. And so finally somebody came in and said, I'm different than that bunch, and so we're going to work this out. And so Republicans started taking huge gains across the country simply because they said, we will work together to work on positive things. And I think that once you see the economy start changing and people's attitudes getting back together, there's more hope, there's more optimism. I think you're going to see more and more people being elected that will go up there and actually try to do something that's positive to get this country moving again, rather than just sit there and just being against everything that comes up. Because that's what the Democrats said with Republicans during the Obama administration. They're the party of no. Everything that the president tries to come up with, they say no, unanimously. No, which wasn't true. They voted for most of the stuff he actually wanted. But, whether it's bipartisanship or not, I don't care. I just hope that things continue getting done and this country continues to get back on track.
So, Carol, by the end of the day today, the margin in the Senate between Democrats and Republicans will shift a bit. 51 to 49 with the swearings in that are planned for today. Good side, bad side for what the president's going to do, or any indicator?
Nothing's going to change. I mean, it's still going to be the argument that's been going on. Entitlements, as far as entitlements, I think I would take them off the table until after the midterms, because they're bigger fish to fry in terms of the infrastructure and getting the immigration situation. Trump wants that wall. And he knows that he's going to have to negotiate about DACA. Now, how they negotiate about DACA is one thing. If he gets his wall, realistically, can you throw out that many people? No, probably not. And it would be politically probably suicide to do it. However, you can, for instance, on the lottery for the visas, the visa lottery that has caused so many problems, I think he's going to shut that down or significantly reform it. On some of the other immigration programs, that we have going on, I think that's going to come into play. He's going to get as much as he can out of this because he wants that wall and he wants some of these reforms in our immigration program, and he's going to have to give a little bit on DACA to do that, and I think he will. Now, on the infrastructure, this is an interesting thing because, once again, the Democrats, man, I'll tell you what, they're clever. Their whole thing is they want the federal government to pay for it. Everything. Trump and the Republicans want it to be a shared thing between the states and the feds. And the reason for that is if it goes strictly federal, those big blue states are going to get the majority of the entitlement and the majority of the infrastructure. And that's what they're worried about.
Stafford, last night on Mark Levin, someone called in because he was talking about Iran, things going on in Iran. We're not going to totally dive into that, but he said, why are people, talking about this when the most important thing is the wall? And Ben Ferguson jumped all over him and said, I agree, it's an important issue, but it's not the most important that we have to only talk about the wall 24/7.
Right.
The wall obviously has a place in the legislative agenda.
Yes. In Trump's legislative agenda.
In Trump's legislative agenda. Where do you see, 2018 going this way?
Well, I think Carol's right about waiting until post-midterms for entitlements. I think if entitlements try to get addressed and it gets forced through the way that I say forced, if it gets passed the way some of these other things have been passed, I think it would be, I think you'll see a swap of control in potentially both the House and the Senate. So, the wall, I don't see how it happens. The thing I said last week, and I think the thing that sticks out is that if the Trump administration would have started with infrastructure, that was something that everybody kind of agreed, like, okay, we need to work on roads and bridges. Let's find some common ground and tackle common ground stuff first, get some wins under our belt together, show some success. And instead we had, one major piece of legislation passed last year, which, was almost close to not getting passed. I was wrong about not making it out of committee, but it did. And back to what Warren said about getting rid of the word bipartisan, the reason that the two-party system works is that it supports the most people possible. If we had a three-party system, you'd have a majority at 34%, right? Because we have a two-party system, a majority at 51%. It's important that these people find a way to work together, that find solutions that make sense to get stuff passed. We were promised that Medicare and Medicaid wouldn't get touched, and it just seems like that's not going to happen anymore. So they talk about welfare reform. I'm anxious to see what their idea of reforming welfare is. We keep hearing that the economy's not that great, but unemployment's at 3.7%. I think Paul Ryan said something important yesterday when he said that they're trying to get the people who have made out of the workforce back into it. But I don't know how you do that by giving cash to corporations. Typically, corporations don't hire people unless they have more demand. And you don't create more demand by giving money to the corporations. You create more demand by giving money to the individual. So is there potential for them to innovate with that money and potentially create new markets? Yeah. Would those new markets pull the people who are unemployed out back into the workforce? I don't know.
All right. North Korea and South Korea seem to be cozying up at least a little bit. Started earlier this week, talked about the Olympics, and now we know there was a phone call on a hotline.
On the hotline that, hadn't used that hotline in 2 years.
Yeah, the White House not happy about that. We will get our panelists' thoughts coming up next on Winging It Wednesday, brought to you by our friends over at Service Cadillac. Bernie, you played the wrong song.
I didn't say they were going to taste good, though. No, I'm just kidding.
And delicious.
Guys, Drake actually made his KPEL debut this morning.
That was hilarious. Yeah, yes. That's what I said.
Because if anything describes this North Korea, South Korea thing, it's hotline bling.
I thought you meant he showed up here.
No, he doesn't.
Now, that would be hilarious.
He's from Canada. He might have some relatives here. You never know.
Maybe he's more political than we realize.
Anyways.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so North Korea, South Korea talked for 20 minutes on the hotline after 2 years of no communication back and forth. Reports say
they got ghosted.
Yeah. Swatted. Not ghosted, right?
No, I thought it was ghosting.
Yeah, ghosting.
Ghosting is when you just disappear.
Where you just stop talking to somebody.
Yeah,
you just
that's it.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's painful.
The ghosting is over.
I finally have one relevant comment that sort of might have been from 2017, and the boy dogs me.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Anyways, so obviously a lot between the U.S. and North Korea. We have Trump talking about his nuclear button being bigger and more powerful than Kim Jong-un's. There's just a lot going on with this story. Carol, we'll start with you. Should we be concerned about South Korea's conversation with North Korea?
His is bigger than Kim Jong-un's. Trump, if nothing, I think he has a great sense of humor, actually. I mean, when you do something like that, you got to have a sense of humor. This is troubling for some people, but, it's not clear what was said, but this, to me, is an indication. China is putting the pressure on, and so are the increased sanctions and the unanimous resolutions coming out of the UN Security Council. Maybe it has him sitting up and paying attention. I don't know. But, South Korea, they actually have a Ministry of Reunification.
Wow.
And so, yes, they do. And the South Koreans have always been kind of soft on North Korea because that's a lot of their family are,
Well, there you go.
So that in that instance, it might have the Trump administration a little troubled, and the folks at the UN, our UN representatives, a little bit scratching their heads. It's not clear what's going to come out of this, or if anything at all. He is concerned about the Olympics in South Korea, and he does want to get some of that action. I know that. So we'll see whether it has a lot to do with that. What's going to happen with their economy has got to be tanking. There have been more defections, not as dramatic as the original one, but there have been more from the army. These people are starving to death. And with these increased sanctions, and by the way, they caught China, of course, red-handed shipping to North Korea. And by the way, somebody look out for Russia. They've been doing the same thing. So it's really difficult to enforce sanctions when you have two major powers constantly, defying the sanctions. But what will come out of this phone call, that remains to be seen.
Stafford, in the case of who has the bigger button, the U.S. or North Korea?
I think it's all about the relevance of the size of the hand pushing it, right? So.
Okay, that's it's an important distinction.
They're probably the same size button, but because Trump has a smaller hand, it just looks like this
terrible. You're going back to the election.
Terrible. It's like the Whopper commercial from years ago, right? So, look,
yeah, right.
First off, the line between the two nations is fascinating. Okay, so they have a abandoned town on both sides. These buildings are 100 yards apart. There's a red phone and a green phone, and on odd days, one of the countries gets to call the other, and on even days, the other country gets to call the other, right? And it's a very important step in communicating for those guys because at any point in time, they're on the brink of war, right? That situation is very, very, very tenuous. The thing that I struggle with Trump's involvement is that I believe in Rex Tillerson's ability to kind of move the needle there to de-escalate, and then we have just these absolutely asinine tweets coming from the executive of the United States, when in reality, if no tweet was made, we'd be talking about the success of the line of communication opening between the two countries, right? So I think it's a good thing that they're talking. I think there's a lot of people who don't want to go to the Olympic Games because of the risk of being nuked by North Korea. And we know that these guys can reach mainland now, right? And look, if he's willing to starve his people, he's willing to keep pushing it. And Carol's right about China and Russia being caught, selling fuel to the North Koreans. South Korea continues to seize Chinese vessels that are getting caught selling fuel there, and these guys are going to continue to offer aid and support to countries that we have bad relations with. Same thing's happening with Pakistan right now. China's trying to come in and fill that role. And, as we lose our place as a, world leader, which has honestly been through payments and bribes, right? We pay these countries to love us. As we lose those places, other people are filling those roles.
All right, Warren, you're the one that always comes in the clutch with the history. Do we have another place where this has happened, where it was one country that's now two, one seems to be on our side and the other one does not?
Well, we've had that over and over and over again, but the big thing about it is right now what I see about the tweets and such stuff is that for the last 30 years, when we had people in the White House who were presidential, who were civil, who were gentlemen, who were not kooky, who were not brash, bold, big-mouth New Yorkers with small hands and all of that kind of such stuff. What they gave us was more of the same, and that was appeasement to North Korea that, you make your little threats or whatever, and we're going to come over and give you $2 billion not to make them again, and that happened over and over and over and over again. And so what happens with that? Every time that we gave them $2 or $3 billion, they went ahead and did what they said they weren't going to do. I don't want to hear anybody mention the United Nations, the UN Security Council, because they are not worth a damn. Not the first one. George H.W. Bush said that he looked forward to the New World Order when the nations are governed by a creditable United Nations through the rule of law, not the rule of the jungle. And I don't. Kim Jong-un and the rest of those, they only understand one thing, and we used to have that. It was called MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction, which is the way it governed nuclear powers of the world, is that you knew that if you launched a nuke, or if you tried to, you were going to be turned into black sand, and that worked for 70 years. And so you got this guy up there making these threats. He's actually launching missiles. He's actually exploded a bomb more than anyone else has done. It's time for the damn diplomacy to stop. And I think Trump is exactly right. You want to push it, you can only push it so far, but you're going to suffer the consequences. And South Korea will wipe them out in about 42 minutes.
Or less.
If they want to.
And by the way, that was great, Warren. That was absolutely great. And the fact that Trump is the disruptor that he is, we have seen one thing after another. We haven't seen the end of his disruption. Thank goodness, because there are so many things that need disruption, not only in our government, but in the world governments, because there's been so much graft, corruption, etc., buying off people that never stay bought. You will never keep people bought. They're always going to go to the highest bidder. So Trump is actually turning off the spigot, and I am so glad, because if you look into the money has been spent around the world on traitorous regimes, on thuggish regimes that really they destroy their own people. I think it's time we turn off the spigot. And as far as Rex Tillerson, he's been a disaster. He has been a disaster.
All right, Stafford, you can wrap this one up for us, and we'll move on to downtown Lafayette development.
Yeah, one of the biggest contributors that we give aid to is Israel, and I don't believe
they don't export terrorism, and they don't trouble other people.
What we don't, I don't agree with what you said about us giving money to thugs. I also don't agree with what Warren said. An eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. And yes, we do have mutually assured destruction set in place. That's been in place. But the problem that we found is that if that happens, everybody dies.
And it hasn't happened, has it?
Well, it hasn't, because we've had 30 years of diplomacy. And
it hasn't happened because everybody understands the risk.
There's artillery along the North Korean border that can eliminate the majority of Pyongyang and South Korea, Seoul, in an hour, right? And they do have a very large army. To suggest that we should pull our men that are still engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan to go fight in North Korea, it to me just doesn't make sense.
Well, nobody's suggesting that at all.
To go fight North Korea.
So you're saying that we should end diplomacy.
I am saying that we don't need to be doing things that are just absolutely stupid, and that's doing the same old things we've been doing.
Okay.
Nothing has happened except they have been emboldened.
That's right.
They now have nuclear weapons. They now have intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Because of diplomacy.
They now have every bit of that because we did nothing but talk and give them money.
Exactly.
And let me tell you something about your artillery over there. You understand that what we have today are these tracking systems that can pinpoint where an artillery shell comes from in a matter of milliseconds?
Doesn't matter if you can get them all off in 5 minutes.
Huh?
Doesn't matter if you can get them all off in 5 minutes. You can go blow up all the artillery you want, but if they can if they can get it off like that, it just that doesn't matter.
Get it off like that.
Have you heard of THAAD?
You just got through saying 45 minutes or something like that.
Artillery doesn't go high altitude. So look, here's the deal. I believe that diplomacy is important. I believe
Stafford,
I'll go over people. Hold on.
I believe that
and you can wrap it up.
Our efforts to cut them off are working. I mean, you just saw there's a news release the other day that soldiers in North Korea are being given leave to go steal corn. Right? They're starving. The people that have come over are showing up with parasites. They said they look like walking petri dishes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we know
You're making
that
our point.
We know that it's working, right? So I think that the diplomacy works, and I think rattling sabers just doesn't do any good. The fact that they're communicating is a good thing.
Carol,
the reason that they're starving and all that kind of stuff is that we quit giving them money.
Money, exactly.
And we cut off their fuel.
Quickly, Carol, and then we have to move on.
Well, armies fight on their bellies. Is that correct, Warren? Have you heard that phrase before? Do you think these people are going to fight? They're going to defect. The first chance they have to get across that border, they will defect. And by the way, the anti-missile defenses that are in place in South Korea are quite effective. They've been very effective in Israel. That place, lots of people like to vilify, who is our durable, reliable ally and a great light in the world.
It's 7:30, Winging It Wednesday. Great conversation, guys. Brought to you by our friends over at Service Cadillac, where there are a ton of new Cadillacs, even some leftover 2017s on the lot. You just got to go stop by. Look, the weather is cool, but trust me, it is warm inside the showroom over there.
Oh, yes.
And they make this show possible each and every week.
We love him.
Choked up
and let me tell you, he does get choked up. Let me finish his statement because I'm driving my new Cadillac and I absolutely love it. I never thought I would be as addicted to the engineering. It combines two things. The thing that I love is the engineering of a car, but it combines that with the luxury.
And
it's
Carol,
awesome.
We also know you're a speed demon.
Yes.
I've been next to you at red lights.
Don't say that.
And we know that's your deal too. So anyway, all right, it's 7:31 now at News Talk 96.5 KPEL. All right, so downtown Lafayette looks very different than it did even whenever I went to college here. Obviously, I lived away for a while, but it looks very different now, and it seems like there's a new push in 2018 to get some of those abandoned buildings filled with tenants, with businesses. We've seen Dat Dog open up, a couple stores that used to not be there, kind of mainstream stores that are down there now. Rock and Bull's being built. Stafford, where do you see this push going in this calendar year?
A healthy downtown is a healthy Lafayette, and I'm excited to see that kind of stuff. You know, one of the things that the Downtown Development Authority was always good at pointing out is the economics of multi-use buildings and the abundance of multi-use buildings downtown. The return on investment, tax-wise, and everything. They're money makers for the community. The biggest problem they have downtown is that there's no living. I think there's 10 homes there that are technically in the downtown area that can be rented. Very few apartments. I think they just put some lofts. They converted an old hotel into lofts there. But I can tell you, crime was going up, right? We were having issues downtown. We had a shooting at Festival International, which was absolutely terrible. Well, it was post-Festival International, absolutely terrible. And I think the way that you fix that is, and just because I'm in lighting, but A, light the place up, like get it brighter so there's not a lot of dark spots at night. And then create a healthy entertainment area, right? And so I'm ecstatic. I hope they do something with that old federal courthouse. I think it would make an awesome dine-in movie theater. If there's anybody out there who's willing to invest in this, I think that'd be the place to do it, right? I'm excited about there being a bowling alley downtown. I mean, when you have kids, it's tough to justify going downtown, right? Because it's all bars. I'd love to see some family entertainment down there during the day. Dat Dog, I'm ecstatic about. I mean, I'm a big guy. I didn't get this big by not enjoying food. So,
first step is always admitting it, Stafford.
Yeah, admitting you have a problem. But I'm excited for the direction that they're going. I mean, when I was growing up, we hadn't done the streetscape, and we got told by everybody that it'd be a terrible investment, and they were throwing away money, and we were wrong, and we're fortunate that we did it. I think it's thriving. I think it's vibrant. I would just love to see us have a functioning hotel down there, and a big one, and apartments, places for people to live.
Warren, do you see this development happening in 2018?
I think the first thing that we need to look at is that we have stopped the war on downtown that took place for the last 12 years under the Durrell administration. If you talk to the merchants downtown, the property owners and all of that, is that it was just animosity towards them. And what some of them wanted to do was to go down there and start a bus service to bus the homeless people over to River Ranch. The homeless people basically took over downtown, and what you really need is a good show of force from the police department. You talk about lighting, you talk about this, you talk about that. If people don't feel safe, then that's your big problem. And I do think that the last thing you need in this city is having a decaying area such as downtown. You go to places where they have that, and it absolutely it's just a cancer that just starts growing. So the first thing I would say, you want a big hotel down there? Then go build one. Talking about the federal building, I don't think the federal building, it needs to be torn down. I think that everybody who's looked at that thing said that it's going to cost more money to try to renovate it than what it would cost to demolish it and build another one. So it's just sitting there as a monument to nothing. And, there's things that need to be done. You can do some things through low interest loans, through tax exemptions or some of that, but in the end, people have got to feel safe. They got to want to be there. and on and on. But if you start talking about how many people live there and all that, how many people live in downtown Central Business District of New Orleans?
And they have quite a few apartment buildings.
Yeah, they do. Lots of people do.
Where, in the Central Business District down Canal Street?
Yeah, the biggest problem in New Orleans is gentrification. All the places that were considered high crime areas are now becoming like the hip places to live because they're cheaper.
I'm talking about that generally your downtown area is a central business district that does not support a lot of residents.
Yeah, that's not the case anymore in New Orleans.
All right, Carol, your thoughts? It kind of seems to me like if you're going to develop downtown, you need to attract a more diverse crowd. It can't just be the college kids to mid-20s folks who want to go there on Saturday night. Welcome into the show.
Thank you so much. Since I was there at the creation of the Downtown Development District as an entertainment and cultural and arts district, my husband put in the legislation. As many of you know, we walked door to door to get the millage that was passed, voted on by the residents and the business owners of downtown, and the streetscape. We pushed hard for streetscape. And I think all of those things have laid the groundwork. There's a lot more work to be done. However, having said that, I think that we see now the lighting that's being put in by the utility system, this new form of lighting. That's number one. Number two is they very carefully worded the new precinct downtown as not a high crime precinct, but an entertainment precinct, if you've seen that. So that's good. They named it an entertainment precinct. Now, let's hope that the additional policing will help to create that feeling of safety downtown. Now, in the terms of residential, I mean, government has made a lot of investments downtown. You look at the ACA, the Science Museum, the federal courthouse, our local courthouse and jail complex. I mean, government has made a lot of investments downtown. The problem here is the holy grail of residential. And until you make it that attractive, and all these business investments, wonderful. I mean, I'm really happy about that, especially, the Rock and Bowl and Dat Dog and all the others. But I drove up Jefferson Street, and I saw that really nice sign that they spent money on, but I saw a lot of vacant buildings for lease driving up Jefferson Street, and that is troubling. What I don't want to see is government once again putting its thumb on the scale and favoring certain things. We've had LPTFA has been putting in apartments downtown. It just hasn't seemed to work. The folks who owned the lofts previously, the Simon sisters, that has not seemed to work. So I want to see a different kind of approach to this and not have government always being the one having to support. I want to see maybe credits for private developers to come in, but I don't think government has to be continually the one on the hook for the money.
All right, wrap this one up, Stafford.
If you give tax credits to private developers to build a residential area, then the government is funding.
Well, they're not funding directly. Let me put it this way: they can provide some incentives, but they're not giving them cash up front, as they did with the Costco development.
All right.
I mean, really, that translated to cash up front. That translated to money up front.
I mean, it's in the form of tax breaks, and
they already have tax credits downtown. I mean, they do have certain tax credits downtown.
I hope that they work on residential development downtown.
But I don't want to see government doing it.
We're going to move on to the economy here in the state of Louisiana. It's kind of like the tale of two economies. We're hearing people in Shreveport, business owners in Shreveport, saying they can't get enough workers, and you have people down here who are still laid off. 7:43 now at News Talk 96.5 KPEL, what Governor Edwards has to say on his outlook for 2018. Stay with us. 7:44 here. All right, we heard from Governor John Bell Edwards in his beginning of the year address. Go ahead.
No, just one quick thing to wrap up on the downtown, because the research so many times is like 10 years behind what is actually happening. Talking about all the millennials wanting to live downtown, I just read a research paper about millennials now, as soon as they get married and have kids, they want to move out to the suburbs because they want a yard and they want schools and all that kind of stuff. I'm just wrapping it up that way because every time you cite one of these marketing studies, it's usually out of date by the time it gets here.
And you have to, I mean, I'll be honest, I've lived downtown in Atlanta and lived downtown in Dallas, and they couldn't have been more different because, kind of like Warren said, in Dallas, you have so much land. All of the companies now are in Irving and in Arlington and everywhere else. So downtown is really dead. I mean, it's a Monday through Friday place. Monday through Friday, during business hours, you can go anywhere. But even us living downtown, we would drive to Arlington, to wherever, to do our things. So it just kind of depends. Very different in Atlanta. In Atlanta, people work, live, play, everything downtown because there's Centennial Park and everything else
where the players play.
Where the players play. All right, let's talk about the economy here in the state of Louisiana. In his end of the year, beginning of the year transition speech, I guess you want to call it. I never know if it's it's always a wrap up and a preview. So it's not an end of the year address as more than it's a beginning of the year. But anyway, the governor was pretty proud of the unemployment rate, said there are going to be more employment opportunities to come. And, it's kind of hard, especially living in this part of the state where we have seen so much job loss. Warren, let's start here. Your 2018 preview of the Louisiana economy. Put on your positive hat, sir.
Whoa, I can tell you what. God, I don't even know where to start. We got so many problems that we need to be addressing here in Louisiana, and I think that Governor John Bel Edwards is going about everything as backwards as you can go. Is that we are bleeding. We have a war on businesses in Louisiana, and what does he do? He comes in and he ratchets it up another round or two. I mean, what's he done? Got $2 billion in new taxes he's put on us. Here's the guy who came into office saying he was not going to raise taxes. There are just so many things we need to sit down and tackle, and that the way we're going about it, he's now saying that, he's putting the thing on the legislature that you need to get your game plan together and all that, and his game plan has been one thing: more taxes, and that. What we really need to do is sit down and just look at things and say, why do companies not come here? Why do they not grow here? Why do they leave? And there's several of those answers. There's nothing simple about it, but I mean, there's so many problems we need to do instead of just sitting there pointing fingers at each other in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge is broken. It's probably worse than Washington, D.C., and that they need to go in there and act like adults and sit down and try to straighten out the problems that we have. Because I'm going to guarantee you one thing: virtually every problem we have in this state, roots go to the state legislature.
Carol, your thoughts?
Well, I think it goes really. Where do you start? Corruption and lawsuit-happy environment, and those are two major issues. And you can talk to many businesses. And look, we are subject to the same world oil forces that Texas, Oklahoma, and other states are subject to. So to blame everything in our economy on the price of oil, et cetera, as people love to do, because it deflects the blame from where it really belongs. Texas and all those other places, they have to live under the same constraints and the same world oil prices, et cetera. But they seem to be thriving. Do you know Texas has added like 28 million people. They're flooding to Texas. Texas's economy is just incredible. So could we take a little bit of a lesson from our neighbor to the west and see, well, how are they doing things over there? How can we? I had a friend who called me who's really familiar with the legal issues involved, and he says that perhaps Louisiana should not be on the Napoleonic Code because of certain problems that causes in terms of business expansion into the state. So we have a terrible reputation to overcome in terms of those things: lawsuit, abuse, and corruption. And then we have a governor who continually says, well, I want the legislature to work with me, but he will not work with the legislature. They have come up with so many plans, and he keeps citing that task force on tax reform, and yet he's not willing to embrace all of the items, which the people on the task force have said it's a really tricky balance, and it all needs to work together, but he likes certain things, he doesn't like other things. Especially he likes raising taxes.
So, Stafford, if there's anything we have on record from you here on this show, is I don't think you quite believe the whole war on business story.
No, I don't. I think that's silly. So I think for us to say we have a war on business, where one of our biggest problems is that we've continued to give money to the same businesses that are kind of in a bind right now, right? The reason that our budget shortfalls were so bad in Baton Rouge is because we put out a ton of incentive money. I believe that our local incentive program has been positive in diversifying our economy. I think Baton Rouge has tried to do the same thing. I don't think they've done it at the same pace. And to say that John Bel Edwards is only there to raise taxes, I think the guy's trying to run a balanced budget, which is not very easy to do. Mm-hmm. So And I'm going to go back to what I've said earlier. So, Carol, if you have evidence of corruption, I think you should call the DA and let them know. Because if you do, I can guarantee you they do want to prosecute. Now, when it comes to Texas systems versus Louisiana,
we have instances right here in Lafayette.
When it comes to Texas systems versus Louisiana, you have to look at why the business is booming. Okay, the reason the business is booming is because oil prices being where they are lends very heavily to a system that can get oil out of the ground for $35 a barrel, and that is fracking and land drilling. Our economy in South Louisiana, specifically Lafayette, Houma, Morgan City, and parts maybe just a tad bit west of here, is tied very heavily to action in the Gulf of Mexico. At $60 a barrel, you're not going to see a lot of drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. And with automation being increased, you're not going to see a lot of jobs coming back in that business. That being said, we are seeing some positive things happen here. We can't continue as a society to play this hack move and blame everything on politicians. Okay, John Bel Edwards, what you can disagree with the legacy lawsuits thing, and that's fine. But I don't think that's the reason that Chevron left Lafayette, or that Shell, I think Shell left New Orleans, or left One Shell Square, if I'm not mistaken, right? They left because, think about this, we're the 48th worst place in the United States to raise a daughter, right? Louisiana is terrible to raise kids. Our education system is a joke. We have the lowest per capita requirement for jobs with college educations. Why not go to Houston and pay higher property taxes, but have a better quality of life?
All right, Warren.
You know, talking about the war on business being silly, you go back to about 20-something years ago, they had the fastest growing companies in the United States. And when you looked at that list of them, they were in Florida, they were in Alabama, they were in Mississippi, they were in Arkansas, and they were in Texas. They weren't in Louisiana.
It's 2018, Warren.
Well, that's a hell of a good reason why they weren't in Louisiana. The only one in Louisiana that was Freeport McMoran.
Was it John Bel Edwards' fault then, too?
Let me talk. The Freeport McMoran had made a gigantic discovery in the Gulf of Mexico, which like double their price or something. But you look at it over and over and over. We have got rules, we've got regulations that stifle business, and that's why they don't grow here. And that you talk about jobs coming back for offshore and all that. What, we got 13 rigs drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, as opposed to what it used to be, about 200 and something.
Right.
And the reason for that is mostly it's because the cost of doing business out there.
Yeah.
And that it's the same way it is with everything else here.
When you're in 5,000 feet of water, it's really expensive. And
it's no more expensive there normally to drill 5,000 feet of water there than it is in Brazil or it is in offshore Africa.
May I say something?
You understand that?
There's
no more. You know, it's the same expense to drill in 5,000 feet of water in Brazil, except for the rules and regulations you have to go by. You know, and that, you know, and they work very safe in Brazil and offshore Africa and all of that. But when you look at the places like Chevron moving out, Shell moving out, you know, Shell closed down all of their drilling on land here 25 years ago, and they did it for a reason. You know, they go, it's like the flow of water and the flow of electricity. Business is going to go to where the least resistance is. And when you build up resistances in a place, guess what? They're going to find a way to go somewhere else. They're going to go find a place where people are not trying to put them out of business, which is what we're trying to do in Louisiana with virtually everybody.
Carol?
And the reason we have those tax exemptions to all those companies is because our tax structure is so screwed up in this state that the only way to get businesses to come here is to bribe them, and then we lose in the end game because we give away so much to get them here and we get very little in return. That's number one. Number two, what do we have, a $1 billion fiscal cliff? What do we transfer to local governments? $5 billion annually. $5 billion from the state. For some reason or other, the state does that, and it's continuing. And how many contracts do we have? 19,000? If you cut back a little bit on those or at least phase them out, there is no rational thought going behind our tax structure, and that is a problem. And a lot of times it does have to do with corruption, and it does have to do with lawsuits, and it does have to do with cronyism.
All right, quick answers on this as we are wrapping up. We're coming short on time. What's the percentage of jobs lost in Lafayette that come back this year? Stafford.
Oh, wow. I mean, I'd be impressed if we got 3%.
All right, Warren?
I have no idea.
Carol?
I wouldn't even hazard a guess.
Okay.
Not at this point in time.
So doesn't seem like we're too encouraged.
Well, I think
there
are some things coming back slowly, but it's very slow. And a lot of, we'll see what happens. That March offshore sale may tell us more than anything else.
I think if you see more stability in Iran and Saudi Arabia and you see prices go up and stay there, I think we'll see some deep water exploration happening.
All right. Winging It Wednesday. Warren.
One quick thing, a little bit, a positive note and a little bit of optimism. One of my friends from Minnesota sent me an email that says, "How does it feel to be in the 20 degrees in the middle of a heat wave?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, it is 7:56 now.
Happy New Year, guys.
That we are not booming is insane because we have all the resources here, especially the great people.
All right, Winging It Wednesday brought to you each and every week by Service Chevrolet Cadillac. It's Wash It Up Wednesday. Go get that ride clean. Why drive around in a dirty car?
Yeah, because that doesn't look pretty.
I mean, unless you have a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old, you have no... Warren has no idea we're still on the air.
Yeah.
Hey, anyway, we're back with more Acadiana's Morning News next on News Talk 96.5 KPEL.
Let's see here, kids.
Yeah, people just don't want to go to Shreveport. Why would you?
Yeah, exactly. Watch out for a stalled vehicle, Ambassador Caffrey at 90 eastbound. That's a stalled vehicle, Ambassador Caffrey at 90 eastbound. Also on the I-10 South Frontage Road in Scott, we have a traffic fender bender there. That's the I-10 South Frontage Road in Scott near Harold Gothay Road. If you have an update on what's happening in traffic, call us 237-KTDY. That's up to the minute traffic report. I'm Bernadette Lee.
All right, if you like Todd Starnes, he's coming to KPEL every week for 3 hours. Saturday nights, 6 to 9, the Todd Starnes Show premieres this Saturday.
Okay.
We used to have the Robert Davi Show.
Uh-huh.
Robert Davi has moved on to supposed greener pastures.
Yeah, I think he kind of retired. He's like, I don't really want to do that.
We are so excited to welcome Todd Starnes.
We're like, hey, Todd.
To our Saturday lineup. You know, KPEL was one of the first to carry the Todd Starnes commentaries.
No, try the first.
Oh, the first. Well, good for you, Bernie.
Right now, 30 degrees, sunshine here at the KPEL studios. The Acadia Sheriff's Office is investigating the death of a 5-month-old in Dusal. Here's Derek Albert with more on the story. Three suspects are in custody in an investigation that continues into the shooting of a middle-aged man. Now, the remains of this man were found in a ditch adjacent to a trailer park in Gonzales. They don't know how the person specifically died other than the shooting, but they say there's a lot of background on the case, and it continues to be ongoing at this time. Top Republicans and the governor are sparring ahead of the January 19th deadline for a deal